Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. So I'm finishing up my games for Wesley So as White from the Tata Steel Masters Wijk Aan Zee 2020. And so the game I have for you guys right now is taken out of round 13, the penultimate round. And it is between Wesley So and world champion Magnus Carlsen. And this picture that I actually have, and the one that's on the thumbnail, is them actually playing at the board. So yeah. So if you guys are ready, I'm ready. Let's take a look. Just real quick though, let me go ahead and do put this up here. So this is the tournament results. So this is you see Wesley So there 7.5 out of 13. So we have +2 wins, -0 losses, and equals 11 draws. So that gives us our 7.5 out of 13. So he's kind of up there. He's almost in first place or whatever with that. Just 2.5 down there. Get this out the way. All right. So if you guys are ready, I'm ready. Let's take a look and see what we got here. All right, so we have E4, best by test, E5, just challenging, what white is trying to accomplish. All right, so we have knight to F3. All right, knight to C6, knight to C3, and we have knight to C6, or knight to F6. And so now we have the 4 knights game, the Scotch variation we're into here. All right, so we have D4, just trying to give these bishops, space to move out. And just challenge the center. All right, so we have pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. All right, bishop to b4, and now this is a very strong move. It's the top move, and it puts a lot of question, to what white's trying to do. And so there's a lot of problems that you kind of have to solve in this particular position as white, because you have this pawn that's attacked directly now because the knight is pinned to the king, and there's only really one good way to defend against this threat. You definitely don't have you don't have bishop here. That blocks your queen's ability to defend this knight, so you're just gonna be dropping the knight for free. I mean, you have a possibility of doing that. You're gonna be damaging your structure. And so the best situation, the best move for you to do in this particular situation is going to be what Wesley So does, and that's knight takes c6. It's going to be the strongest. It's going to be the strongest reply to bishop to b4. And so we have b takes c6. All right, so bishop to d3. So as you can see, I mean, we saw pretty much all the problems I was mentioning, and we still have the possibility of our structure being messed up. But we're able to protect that. We're able to protect that pawn on e4 with the knight being pinned down there. All right, so we have d5. Just hoping for pawn takes, and you can take back with this pawn and repair your structure, because black's structure is a little bit damaged real quick here. All right, so we have bishop to d2, castles and castles. And so as you guys see, I mean, black only really has a move or two until they're fully developed. White is actually, I mean, of course, because of the first move, they have the ability to, move queen somewhere and get themselves fully developed. And so, each side is doing, exactly what you want to do out of the opening. They're developing their pieces. They're getting castled. And so, that's the best case scenario, when you're playing a chess game. All right, so we have bishop takes c3. Bishop takes c3. All right, so we have pawn takes e4, and we have bishop takes f6. And so you definitely want to throw that move kind of in between there, because you're looking at losing a pawn. If you don't, you're not able to take back the the pawn on e4 because you have the knight situated on f6 defending it. So you have two options. You can either take the knight off the board, or you can drop the bishop back and pretty much lose a pawn. So we have queen takes f6. All right, so we have bishop takes e4. All right, queen takes b2. Bishop takes c6. And of course, only move out of rook. You got to move to b8. And then so we have rook to b1. Obviously just putting a direct threat onto this rook. If the queen is to move away. And so, of course we don't have that. So we have, queen takes b1, queen takes b1, rook takes b1, and then we have rook takes b1. And so, just kind of at first glance, like pretty much black and white have like exactly the same structures. Uh, everything is, everything is by all accounts fairly equal. I mean, you see, we have the pawn structure is completely the same in front of the king. We got the same pawns. Like everything is almost identical. All right, so we have rook to d8. It's the only really move you can make, moving the rook. We just try to put on the open file here, and just keep everything safe and tight. All right, so we have bishop to f3, and now it is in this position that we have the novelty of the game. Bishop to f3. So that's the first time this position has been seen, and it is a brand new move, brand new game here, guys. All right, so we have king to f8, and now so I want to back up here real quick, and I'm curious as to if any of you guys were thinking of rook to d2 here, because you're thinking about it, you're like, I don't have any back rank issues because my bishop is here, right? If I run into something like this, I mean, I can always just move rook back. And so once we skip ahead a little bit, I'll kind of show the difference between this particular variation and the variation that actually comes up. It's not super significant of a difference, but it's those little things that really make a difference in your in gameplay. Because when you waste even a tempo, sometimes that's enough to just lose an entire game. So if we back up here to what's actually played, we have king to f8, and then we do have rook to b8. All right, so we have rook back to, so we have rook to e8, and we have h4. Just giving the king what we call Luft. In German, Luft is air. And so, we're just making sure that we don't have any back rank issues. We definitely don't want to drop back rank checkmate. So we're just giving, we're giving the king a little bit of air. And that's a very logical square for it to go to. When you have situations where you're battling against an opposing bishop, you want to try to put your pawns on the opposite color square from your opponent's bishop. And you also want to put your own pawns on opposite color squares so that your bishop has good movability throughout the structure and stuff. So, all right, so we have bishop to a6 and rook to b3. And so as you guys can tell, if we back up a touch, you pretty much wound up in kind of the same position, but you didn't have the tempo waster, of moving the rook down first and then having to move the rook back. So you kind of saved the move in essence here. So we move forward a little bit. All right, so we rook to b3. All right, so we have bishop to e2. Just trying to trade this bishop off. It's a little bit of annoying move because you don't want to damage your structure. So it kind of forces a trade here. So we have bishop takes e2 and rook takes e2. And so like I said, everything is still fairly equal. You have the exact same, pieces and pawns, and it's almost a completely identical structure here. All right, so we have rook to c2. We just have to make sure that we defend that pawn. On c2, we definitely don't want that one to drop. All right, so, the best way to defend that pawn right there is going to be, moving rook back to e7. All right, so we have f3. Just creating a avenue for the king to try to move, along this diagonal here. Instead of moving to the side, moving diagonally is a little bit better. All right, so we have king to e8, and king to f2, king to d7, and rook to a3. Now, it might kind of look like, this series of moves for black has just kind of given away the a7 pawn. It kind of did, but at the end of the day, you're going to be able to get your material back, and your ultimate goal when you're getting into the end game is, you're trying to get the kings in the best possible position. So you've seen games before where I've talked about giving up a pawn to get your king's position. Sometimes it's worth it, and so we have rook to e5 and rook takes a7. But then, like I said, you have the ability now to get this pawn here on c2. So you haven't really truly given away a pawn. You just figuring out like which pawns you want to give up and which pawns you want to take, you know, basically. So, all right, so we have king to e3. All right, rook takes c2. We have g4, and we have h5. And this is a point here that I really wanted to talk about here, because it might seem in this position you're just thinking like, man, like why do you go h5? Like, it just kind of seems like you just give a pawn away, right, with h5. Well, the thing about it in this particular endgame is you're trying to create as many weaknesses as possible. Because you definitely want to try to tie. If you can create weaknesses on multiple parts of the board, it really kind of ties your opponent's pieces down. In the protection of those pieces. And so in this particular position, you're having this h5 move, because what your goal is to try to, you know, damage this structure that white has. And so right now, black has a very healthy pawn chain, white has a very healthy pawn chain. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to chip away at that. And so it, you know, basically forces you to answer a question like, am I going to, you know, just push the pawn up? So what's played in the game is actually, you know, g takes h5. But, you know, it makes you think, I mean, are you going to go ahead and push this here? You know, it's and then the problem that you have in this particular position is trying to defend that pawn. And so that's why you don't really want to, you know, push h5. And so we have g takes h5, and then we have rook to c4. And now in this particular position, you have two different ways you can try to attack this pawn. You have rook here, and then you have rook here. Now the problem with this particular move here is the fact that it allows this move to defend the pawn. So you actually did give away a pawn in that position. So, you know, rook to c4 kind of like, you know, takes care of that. It puts the rook in the best position defensively and offensively to pick that pawn off. All right, and so we definitely want to protect that pawn on h5. We don't want that one dropping. So we have you know, rook to a5, and then we have a rook takes h4, and you know, doing our own little counter attack. We have rook to g5, and we have king to e6, rook to c5, and doing our own counter attack. So I mean, you know, it's when you're playing chess, guys, like, you know, it's good to defend, but one of the actual best ways to defend a position is to counter attack. So, you know, you're gonna get attacked in situations and stuff, and so, you know, you have two ways that you can react to that. You know, you can just defend, which is legit, but you can also counter attack, which is, you know, kind of a type of defense. And so in this particular position, you know, instead of defending the pawn, which would actually repeat position, you know, he goes ahead and plays rook to a4, you know, putting his own threat on the board. And so, you know, white is basically doing the same thing that black did earlier, trying to damage the structure and make these pawns easier to grab. And so, you know, we have g takes h6. We have rook takes c7, king to f6. You know, making the effort to try to hold on to that pawn on h6, because clearly, you know, you're looking at, you know, this as a possibility of a check, and then you're able to just pick this pawn off. So you definitely don't want that. So we have king to f6, rook to c6. And like I said, you know, rook c6 did come, and then now we've moved our king over, so we have the ability to protect this pawn on h6 now. All right, so we have rook to c2, defending this pawn on a2. King to g6. All right, king to f2. We have h5. King to g3. And so we have king to g5, just opposing that other king, trying to make sure that, you know, there's no type of pawn pushes, and, you know, being able to bring the king up further into the board. And so, you know, opposition is a great way to try to prevent somebody's, you know, king from making further ground. All right, so we have rook to c7. And so now we have h4 check. All right, king to h3. We have f5. Rook to h7. Rook to c4. And rook to h8. All right, so rook to c1. a3. King to f4. And rook to h5. Just trying to restrict and make sure that this you know, king isn't able to come forward, so that we, you know, because we're going to be able to snap this pawn off the board here. All right, so rook to rook to a1, just attacking that pawn on a3. And we have h4. And so in this particular position here, I like for you guys to, you know, if you want to, go ahead and stop the video and kind of see if you were black, what would be a good move here for you to play. What comes to mind? You know, take a little bit of time, you know, catch up with us in a minute. And let me see what, I'm curious to see what people are, you know, thinking in this particular position here. All right, so welcome back. And so I think a majority of you guys recognized that, you know, rook takes a4 is a trap. It's not what you want to do. But for those of you that did, you know, consider taking rook, you know, rook taking a4, it is going to be, so let's say, for example, we go into that variation, rook takes a4. What's going to end up happening in this particular position is you're going to be subjected to a tactic called a skewer. And a skewer is basically the opposite of a pin. A pin is when you have a piece that's pinned against a more valuable piece. And the skewer is just the opposite of that. A skewer is going to be when you are attacking a more valuable piece and you have a less valuable piece in the foreground. And so, as you guys, of course, know, the king is the most valuable piece on the board. So a skewer, a lot of times, has, you know, is used against a king. And so in this particular position, you have rook takes h4 with check. And so, like I said, you are attacking this king. There we go. So you're attacking this king. And so now the king has to move because there's nothing it can put in the way. There's no way to capture this attacking piece. So the king is only left with being able to move. And then you're going to be able to pick up this rook in the background. So, you know, if you do something like this, I mean, that rook is just going to drop. And I actually had a game at one point. I was playing in a tournament and it was a complete draw. So we was literally just shuffling back and forth all day. And I pushed a pawn and I was, and I just dropped my rook to a skewer. And I was like, oh man. And so it's annoying. It is annoying. So you definitely don't want to go into this variation. Let's not do that. So we have rook to a2. And so rook to a2 basically defends against that. And it basically, it forces black into kind of a zugzwang position. There's, you know, there's not a lot that, you know, white can do in this particular situation, you know, other than take pawn here. And so, all right, so we have king takes f3. And so we have rook to b4. And we have f4. And so as a lot of you guys know, as far as end games go and stuff like that, you have a lot of drawn situations. And a lot of them center around, you know, this H pawn or this A pawn, you know, the being a rook pawn. But just the fact that rook and king in games with pawns, a lot of them are drawn. You know, you have the ability to draw those types of end games. So there definitely is a lot of technique involved and stuff when you playing these types of games. But you know, a lot of these do end up going into a draw. So we have rook to b3 check. We have king to f2. All right, we have king to g4. All right, so we have rook takes a4. We have rook to f3 check. King to g2. All right, so we have rook takes f4. Rook takes f4, and we have king takes f4. And so, as you guys know, I think everybody out there should know that when you only have kings left on the board, that is a draw. You know, there's nothing else to do. There's no way that a king can checkmate a king. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, you know, king checkmating a king, but that is the round 13 game, Magnus Carlsen versus Wesley So, or Wesley So versus Magnus Carlsen. And like I said, it did get into a draw. So that is the end of me working on Wesley So's games as white, and I'm going to be shifting and I'm going to be working on his games as black coming up pretty soon. So I appreciate you guys stopping by. Go ahead and subscribe and like. Shoot me some comments. Let me know what you think about everything. And if there's any other type of games you want me to cover, let me know, and I will see you guys next time. Appreciate it.